Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to give you guys a quick update on Sony's NEX lineup of mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras. So as you guys can see right here in front of you, I'm not showing you guys anything new. I mean, the newest thing out of this lineup really is Sony's 10 to 18 millimeter wide-angle zoom lens, which I do really enjoy using, especially on the 5N. It doesn't suffer from some of the issues that wide angles do on the 7. But that's not the reason it's on the 7. The reason it's not on the NEX-7 to its right is because that 24mm Zeiss prime lens has pretty much been glued to this camera since I unboxed it for you guys a while back. And then on the left over here we've got the trusty SEL 18-200, the oldie but goodie, which really is still one of my favorite lenses because when you don't want to be swapping lenses, risking getting your sensor dirty, or really just for those of you who don't like the inconvenience of having to swap lenses, you really sacrifice very little going with this, especially when you factor in that it does have that extra mode of image stabilization, which does yield the best video quality I've seen thus far with any NEX lens. Granted, the Zeiss is amazing. It has no optical stabilization, but that's because it is extraordinarily fast, something that the SEL 18-200 simply isn't. That zoom lens is great. All of these are great, and that's why I own them personally. This is what I carry around when I need to cover just about every possible angle. And part of the benefit of having NEXs, for those of you who aren't familiar with the camera system or have just looked at it in store, is that all of this can fit into one bag. And quite frankly, if I had to carry around two digital SLR bodies with two different lenses and then accommodate more lenses off body, well, those of you who know what that's like know where I'm coming from. And that's what's beautiful about the NEX system. But with that said, let's talk about the new NEX models, which unfortunately I don't have here because they're not out yet, but I want to address because for those of you who are looking at picking up an older 5N, 5R, or 6, or the 7, this is really a very relevant conversation. So let's start off with the 3N, which right now is Sony's replacement to their budget model in the NEX lineup. And it looks really good. First and foremost, I'll say, because it does share the same 16 megapixel sensor that we've seen across Sony's lineup of NEX cameras as of late. So you're going to get very similar image quality, or at least you should, to what you'll find in the 5N, 5R, and 6, which is really good at that $500 kit price point. I will include a link in the description to the 3N for those of you interested. And another great thing is that you are going to get the brand new Power Zoom kit lens. And when you think about the value that that represents, since the kit lens goes for $350 retail on its own, granted, I do expect that price to drop over time, much like the old 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens that came with both this camera and this camera has dropped substantially. It's still a great value. I mean, even if you just wanted to split it and get rid of one or the other, you would come out really well. So I like where Sony's going with the pricing there, although it does also lend me to believe that since Sony has been notorious for raising prices on these cameras over time, you know, the 5R obviously more expensive than the 5N, and I do expect the 7N to be more expensive than the 7 because, and they also raised prices on glass from launch. You know, this was originally an $800 lens. It became a $900 lens. The Zeiss 24 was originally a $1,000 lens. It became $1,100. This is all about supply and demand, and Sony just really testing the water, because when you do something revolutionary like this, it is a gamble, even for a large company like Sony. And as many of you may know, Sony has not done well in a lot of areas. So in one of the few that they have succeeded, I don't blame them for jacking up prices and really taking advantage, for being number one for a change in a field that they clearly weren't. So with that said, the 3N seems like it's going to be a really good value for those of you who are looking for a camera that's also going to have an articulating LCD, something the 5N doesn't have. Of course, the 5R does have that. It is more money. A lot of people are going to be saying, should I get the 5R or the 3N? It's really going to come down to feature set. The 5R is a more robust camera, and I'm going to say that I would still recommend the 5R over the 3N, even though I don't have the 3N yet to test for you guys. but that's really just because pricing has been great right now on the 5R. Sales, I've seen the body go as low as under 500, so that's really impressive for a camera that hasn't been out that long and is really a strong performer. Of course, the 5N, a little bit better built in my opinion, missing the Wi-Fi features, but otherwise identical. Some will argue image quality and video quality better from this camera and not just the actual build quality. So that's more a matter of preference. You can still find these even though they're discontinued. New, they are going to be though they'll be less expensive than the 3N, but I wouldn't compare it to the 3N because image quality I do think is still going to be better out of something like the 5N or 5R as I mentioned. But overall, what you're getting out of the 3N in terms of what it represents is a pretty good package because as I mentioned before, the lens itself accounts for most of what you're getting at that $500 price point. So that's pretty critical in my opinion. The more important camera I want to discuss today is the 7N because that's the one that really has me interested personally because the 7, in my opinion, redefined the market. The 5N definitely redefined what Sony had done with NEX cameras because of its incredible low light performance when compared with the 5, which certainly wasn't a chump, but nowhere near what the 5N represented. Also from a video standpoint, granted it had the overheating and clicking issues. The clicking issue, however, resolved for the most part. At least my model is resolved, has no clicking issue. It's still something where when you think about what the 7 represents with the manual controls and the ability to really possibly abandon your digital SLR. Most pros clearly will not because if you're doing professional shoots, most people who are not familiar with photography are going to look at this camera and say, you're shooting my event with that? So even though this may be just as expensive as a much bigger piece of equipment that people will give respect to sheerly out of appearance, you know, this is still as close as you're going to get to really a no-compromise mirrorless solution in my opinion. So the 7N coming out to replace this, what is going to be the big draw? Well, if you already own the 7 like me, you may not really care about what much of at least the rumors have to offer. And right now, the rumors are pointing to essentially adding a touchscreen, which is pretty big in my opinion, no question about it. I just mentioned to you guys that a touchscreen is something that would appeal to me, and that's because it is. But the sensor would be a new 24 megapixel sensor, so that to me may mean you're not going to run into some of the wide angle issue problems, especially with legacy glass that the 7 experienced that the 5N, 5R, and 6 don't deal with because of the difference in terms of the actual sensor. Big improvement for those of you who were not pleased with the viewfinder on the NEX-7 is that it is bumped up to 3.8 million dots in resolution now, so a much higher quality one. And since I was pretty much overall very pleased with the viewfinder, the OLED based one here in the 7, I can only imagine how much better that's going to be. It's going to definitely be helpful to those of you, I would imagine, that want an even more real-time feel from the electronic viewfinder because the 7 was best in class, but certainly there is room for improvement, so that's pretty big. And of course, that hybrid autofocus system, which I reviewed in the 5R and the 6, which really has mixed reviews, but I don't think anyone would reject having added. So that certainly, especially if it's improved upon, is a big, big selling point, especially since this is the semi-pro camera. That's where you want to see contrast and phase both at play. Unfortunately, no GPS, and really that's something I was hoping for. I knew Wi-Fi was a given, even if I didn't read a rumor, hear a rumor. We all knew that Wi-Fi was going to be added to this camera because, quite frankly, it's becoming standard, especially it's already standard in the NEX lineup, at least for the 5R and 6. Granted, the lower models like the 3N that I mentioned before, that $500 value, Wi-Fi is omitted, so keep that in mind. But I really don't think that's a big deal, again, considering the value you're getting out of that camera. But back to the 7. They will still retain the tri-nav system, so if you're worried about losing some of the semi-pro controls and comforts of the 7, don't worry. So even though the touchscreen, which you may find gimmicky, will be there, but I don't, at least for focusing and among other things, then you're going to feel at home with this camera. It's not going to be a deviation from your experience with the current model. Also, they're promising improved focus peaking. Now, considering the focus peaking is already really good on this camera, that's definitely a welcome thing because it's going to give you a choice of colors that's definitely going to make it a better overall solution. And the other key thing is that you're really going to have the same size and form factor. So overall, just a more polished model. So really, whether or not this is going to seem like a evolutionary versus revolutionary model to you as a buyer is going to come down to whether or not you currently own the NEX-7. In my opinion, if you're a current NEX-7 owner, unless somehow that hybrid autofocus system destroys what we've already seen and I've reviewed for you guys in the 5R and the 6, it's going to be tough to argue that it's going to knock the NEX-7 out of the park. Clearly, Wi-Fi, still a gimmick for many users, but I would love to have some of the, the time-lapse application, noise reduction, among many of the other applications that are out there for the 5R and 6 on board with my 7. So that wouldn't make me move up to it necessarily, but for those of you who haven't purchased a camera yet, there's no question that it's going to be a tough choice between getting a discounted 7 because it will be discontinued, and or at least I think it will be, and the brand new 7N, which there is absolutely no pricing on, so I can't give you guys any hint, but if I had to guess, it'll probably be about $50 to $100 more than what we saw this model at. After all, the 5N was originally a $700 camera, at least the kit, and then the 5R was priced at $750. So it's logical based on those numbers to assume we'll see a $50 to $100 price increase on the 7N. I'm going to go with 100 simply because this camera's being aimed at a higher end market, and that makes sense that it would have more than the increase we saw with the 5R from the 5N price point. But overall, really excited to see this 7N. The rumor is that we will see it in May. I hope that's the case, and look forward to giving you guys full impressions of it. Not sure that the 3N is going to make it to my table because I don't even think that it warrants review. At a $500 price point, it's kind of a no-brainer if it's going to come close to what the 5N, R, and 6 have to offer in digital imaging alone, especially with that great, very compact pancake power zoom, that 16 to 50 millimeter lens, which I do really like as long as you respect its limitations and understand the distortions that come with it at its widest point, which of course can be corrected in post. But for the novice that's looking to spend $500, that may already sound like or seem like another language I'm speaking. But overall, really excited about the 7N and can't believe it's finally here. I know a lot of you have been waiting for it, like myself. So, it's definitely very, very exciting. And the official announcement will probably come in April. I credit, of course, Sony Alpha Rumors with this info. They're the first to break it the other day, and I'm glad to see them break it because God knows we've all been waiting to hear what exactly is in store for the replacement for the NEX-7, because while the 5R and 6 are great models, I think too many people moved from the 7 to the 6 simply because they didn't have the patience to wait for what the 7N would have in store. On the other hand, if you move down to the 6 because you bit off more than you could chew with the NEX-7, well then you made a fabulous choice. So no matter how you look at it, I'm still a very, very big fan, as you guys know, of the NEX lineup. This is still my current kit. Whether or not that will change when the 7N arrives, you guys will certainly know. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.